Hello, 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 and welcome. I am very thrilled to be here today to talk to my friend Carissa Step. We met initially doing some multi-level marketing stuff, and I think it's just so cool how we've all sort of transitioned. Those of us who have gone from like the multi-level marketing to like this spiritual, mystical realm. And every time I talk to Carissa in like the past year when we've connected, I just can't stop talking with her because she talks about one of my favorite things in the whole world, which is human design. So, but what we're going to focus on today is how we can reconnect to joy through our intuition and using human design. So, Carissa, thank you so much for being here. And I apologize to everybody because I'm just going to be completely taking notes and nerding out on everything she has to say.
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Kelly. I'm super excited to be here and talk to your listeners. I don't know if you want me to tell you a little bit about, me and my background, just so people can
Please.
get to know who I am. So my name is Carissa Step. I started a career in finance many, many years ago, feels like centuries ago. Became a stay-at-home mom and just kind of always felt like I had this bigger purpose and didn't know what it was. When I worked in finance, it was like, I feel like I'm here to help people, but like I feel like I'm not really helping people. How do I help people? I knew I didn't have enough patience to be a teacher, and I'm too much of a germaphobe to be a doctor or a nurse. So through life, right, which happens, I felt like I started having this like crisis of, wow, I'm like approaching 40 and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life outside of being a mother and a wife. And it led me down these like rabbit holes, like all these different rabbit holes of exploring like how to take care of my body, right? How to reconnect with like that self-care routine that I totally lost having children. And then it evolved into this, this physical well-being evolved into like a mental well-being, into a spiritual well-being and an emotional well-being journey. And interestingly enough, I had a session with an intuitive and she was doing a reading for me. And at the end, she says to me, she goes, I don't know why I'm being called to share this with you, but your guides really want me to let you know that you need to look into this thing called human design. And she was like, I know
Ooh.
nothing about it. I literally had just heard about it recently in a conversation, but you need to explore this. This is important for you. And I was like, okay. So I get off this, call with this intuitive and I immediately go to Google because what do? We go to Google when we don't know anything. And we're like, what is this human design thing? And it led me really far into this rabbit hole of using this beautiful system, I think, to really understand and reconnect back to who I was and what my purpose was. Because the human design chart does that, right? It provides this energetic blueprint that shows us this full potential of who we are and who we can be and what we're here to do. And for me, it felt like such a grounding process in a time where I felt very lost and I was looking for clarity. I
Yeah.
felt very disconnected even from who I was because who I became was more of this person that kind of fit into everyone else's expectations. And it didn't
Yeah.
feel authentic to me.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I can completely relate to that well being arc that you described, sort of, being a mom. And like at some point you wake up and you're like, oh, I haven't taken care of myself. Oops. Like, how did that one get left off of my to do list? Like, way, way off the to do list. And so attached to our roles and raising wonderful kids.
Mhm.
Um, I think I realized very similarly that it wasn't about like, could I be a good mom and a good wife, or could I take care of myself? But I could both and. If I could take that arc that you shared, which was a beautiful way of describing that well-being, that we kind of start at the physical level, like I do a lot of coaching with people with sleep and rest and like getting your life organized, and you sort of continue and then you hit that spiritual piece. And I feel the way that you do in that suddenly getting through all that, there was this scary drop off of like, Well, I just detached from so many of the things that I thought I was and what I wanted to be. And here I am feeling very raw and vulnerable, but also very excited. So that's amazing. And the fact that your guides were like, tap, 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 hello. We're gonna chime in for a minute here and just help you, give you a little shortcut. Here's where you need to go down that rabbit hole.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very grateful that the message came through so clearly, because I mean, I don't know if I would have found human design, to be quite honest, other if I hadn't been really, like, literally, like you said, like, pointed directly in the direction that I had to go down. So
Wow. So it was meant for you. So you get on Google and you're like, okay, what is human design? And for those of you who are listening who may not have had an introduction to human design, you haven't heard me, going fangirl over the whole human design thing because I'm obsessed. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator, which, just basically means that I have a lot of high energy and this ability to go down the rabbit hole like insanely and learn fast and then boil it down and help people understand. So I totally appreciate, because when I first learned about it, I think I was on a group with a friend of ours, Kelly Stewart, who's just this fantastic woman in the energy and element world. But somebody was doing like readings on a live and everybody was blowing up. And so that's how I got my introduction. Mm-hmm. So when you first did it, what did you find out first about human design?
I think the first thing that I honestly just started looking for resources, right? Like, how do I get more information? So I think the first place most people end up is at the Jovian Archive website, because
totally,
as we know, like Ra, that was his, Jovian Archive is his company or whatever. And he was the one who got this download of the human design system. So I started there. And at first I had a little bit of resistance, because when Ra created human design, he really was coming at it from the not self, right? From the lower self. And so a lot of the language felt very kind of abrasive to me. And I was like, oh, like, this is like a little bit uncomfortable. Like, he's going hard. Like, he's pointing this bright flashlight or like spotlight on all of the shadows. And I'm like, there has to be more. Like, I understand, like, we all have shadow work to do, right? We all have things we need to heal. And it wasn't until I found actually a podcast, which we were talking about just before, where I started listening and I loved the reframe of the human design system is really all about experimenting with all of the energies and archetypes that exist within the chart and seeing what resonates for you and where you kind of fall in between that high expression and that low expression. And sometimes we kind of vacillate back and forth between both sides, right? Like, it's an evolution, it's a growth, it's a journey. And, we don't always get to the end enlightened state. That's kind of, the end goal, hopefully, but we definitely are here having a human experience. And so that will alter and change over time through our conditioning, through our experiences and the things that are brought to us, the struggles that we experience and all that. So,
yeah, I love that so much. And I agree with you. Like, at first it was sort of like when you start to investigate your sign. So I'm a Sagittarius. And you start to see these pieces of what you might be like if you're under that sign. And now, the depth that you can go into with human design. And like, initially I was like, oh, well, this explains a lot. And it was very nice, easy ways to explain why I am the way I am. And sort of like you could own your excuses. But like you said, like going into that not self piece, like, well, my not self is frustration. So if it frustrates me, I'm not doing it. I have to be satisfied to do. But yeah, I agree with you. Listening to Emma Dunwoody, who has a podcast, the Human Design Podcast. And if any of you are like really obsessed with human design, like that is the best place to go. She does some fabulous episodes on your design, on each of the different elements. And I agree with you. The idea of using it as an experiment versus like taking it at face value. And I think I've even heard her say that when Ra was designing it, like he gave the 5 different types, or the 4 with the generators and manifesting generators. He gave those to kind of help just frame it a little bit better for people. But that if you sort of removed that from the equation, there's so much depth in there and ways to grow.
Absolutely. The other thing is, so my mentor, who I'm, studying with or whatever, Karen Curry Parker, she basically rewrote all of the language of traditional human design to include quantum language. And it's so powerful because words are frequency, right? And so they impact you in a different way. So you can look at it from more like a high vibe kind of experience. And one of the things that she loves to teach, and it's so true, is we have all of the chart, right? Like when you look at your human design, you're not just your definition. You're also everywhere that you're open. And that openness brings you wisdom because you experience those energies on a variable level and you're able to become wise about what makes sense for you, or like where you're going to resonate within that, or identifying it in other people and seeing kind of where they sit in that, that span. And so I just love that because I think that like we have a lot to, like, when we're learning to decondition ourselves, right, which is part of like the experience of experimenting with your human design, is kind of that deconditioning process, is that we don't just hold conditioning in our definition, we hold it in our, openness as well. And so, there's really, if you're on a personal healing journey, like this is such a great tool to kind of help you identify where you need to focus to kind of get back truly to who you are and to get back onto this path of alignment, which I think just leads to a life full of ease and flow. And I think, like you said, like it kind of gets you into that spiritual, that spiritual well-being path where you start to really just like let go, right? Because I think that, especially like, I don't know if it's like a mom thing or a woman thing, like we tend to like to control things a little bit, right? Like we tend to like to hold on to things, yeah, right? And grasp harder. And when they feel like they're slipping away, and learning to let go and having that, experiencing the grace that comes with that is freeing, right? Yeah. And what is abundance? Like you want to experience abundance, like abundance is freedom.
Agreed.
We all want that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it's so much more than like that financial piece of it. That is a piece of it, and freedom that can come from that. But it's also freeing yourself from the conditioning shackles in your brain, and the mind patterns that aren't working for you, and the conditioning. I mean, I think what you were saying there about, is it women? Is it mom? I think it's a little bit of both. I think that conditioning it's ancestral, right? Mm-hmm. It's societal, and there's this fabric that we're working against by, like I said before, that both and, like you can both be a great mom and an entrepreneur and, whatever else you want to add on to that, because you're not limited by the capacity and the limitations of time. And I know for some people that's a little bit big to digest at once. Mm-hmm. You have to kind of hear it about 100,000 times before you're like, oh, that might actually be true. I might actually be able to see evidence that is actually effective, that actually works, that I'm not limited by what I have the personal capacity for. And I think that was the biggest shift for me. Thinking that that control, I have to do everything. I have to have control over everything. I have to have the energy for everything and everyone. And when I let that go and believed that, like, I'm only serving from overflow, I'm not serving others from my soul's energy. That's mine. I have work to do with that for me. That was a shift.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is realizing that we don't have to figure it all out, because I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to always know the answer or to figure out the answer, right? Like, or we're supposed to, spend all this time and energy just knowing what to do next. And if we kind of ease back into that flow, first of all, it frees up that time because we're spending so much time like focusing on that and putting our energy into it. And if we just take a step back and say, okay, I don't have to figure it out. I can ask the question, and things are going to come into my outer reality that are going to lead me It's having that faith, right? And trusting that those breadcrumbs and those synchronicities and those cues and those clues and the information or the people or the relationships or the opportunities are going to come into our awareness and come into our outer world. And yes, like this is definitely very high level stuff that some of your listeners may be like, wait, this sounds like way too much. I can't take this all in. But when you start experimenting with all of this and you see how this works, it's amazing. I mean, it's truly like, it's almost like a manifesting tool in a way, right? If you can, there's a lot of different pieces to it, and I can talk to you about that, but, starting with the practice of gratitude, right? The things that you focus your attention on are the things you're going to receive more of. So if we get stuck in that conditioned thinking or that stinking thinking, right? Of constantly being like, why does this happen to me? How is this happening to me? How do I get out of this? Like, it always seems to happen and I don't know how to prevent it from happening. It's not your job to prevent it from happening. You're brought those experiences for a reason. You need to learn a lesson, right? Or that person has come into your life to shift something for you, or you're meant to shift after the experience that you've had. And so, having that like practice of gratitude, of being grateful for even the struggles, right? And finding the gifts and the blessings from the pain, of those struggles, is something that it enriches our life whether or not we realize it. I mean, and I think that like you can't really experience the good of that until you kind of allow yourself to go through it, feel it, process it, and learn the lessons.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so powerful. And I think we can look at things like gratitude and affirmations as like, it's so simple. How could it be so helpful? But, my big thing is if you can't just attach to the mystical kind of piece of that, then follow the science of how our brains are wired to be able to realign what is populating into your brain. So if you have those tapes that are playing in your head, you can use your reticular activating system, which is in your brain stem back here. Gratitude is repatterning your brain. And so I think people kind of think like, I'm not going to do that. That seems very, it doesn't, it sounds like a beautiful practice, but it doesn't sound like it's going to make a big difference for me, but it truly, truly does.
It truly does. It also, raises your vibration and your frequency. And when you're able to do that, you are connecting, you are able then to connect into the higher realms and ask the questions of like, okay, like I want something different now. Like I've had all these experiences. It's been really hard. It's been really heavy. I've learned a lot. Now I'm ready for something different. Right. And so asking for something different or asking for something better is another way in which we can kind of manifest those things into our world that, maybe feel juicier, right? That changes our experience, that shifts the things that come into our lives.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. And so if somebody is listening right now and they're like, well, I started a gratitude practice, but it's just like, I feel like I'm stalled out. This is what you want to do. I am so happy and grateful now that, and then you stick in there that thing that like you said, that juicy thing that you're looking to bring to you, to magnetize to you, and you write it. And that's the thing too. I think the act of writing has so much more impact. And I can tell you that my background as an occupational therapist, that when you write, you're making pathways in your brain versus when you type or when you speak it. It's a different part of the brain that lights up. But it is incredibly powerful to write things like that. I am so happy and grateful now that I have $100,000 or more in my bank account, right? So that, I think, I agree with you. I think that is such an impactful practice.
I think the other thing that's really important that we work on to allow us to receive, right? Because I think that's the other half of it, right? If you're not open to receiving, you're not going to get the things that you are maybe asking for, right? Like you have to be open in a way. And the way we are able to do that, honestly, is through self-love, right? You have to love yourself and know that you're worthy of receiving it's so important to be able to stand in your value and say, I know I'm worthy because I am me, right? So knowing who you are, loving yourself for all of who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Like, we're not perfect. We're not meant to be perfect. We're having a human experience. But knowing that because you are a being, like you are a divine being in a human body, that you deserve to receive as much as you're giving, right? And like you said before, like, you're giving from that overflow, and that all comes from this divine, I hate to get so spiritual, but it's true. Like, we all have the capacity to love, right? We love other people, but we need to also love ourselves just as much and unconditionally, and not be critical and not be judgmental, and, not come down on ourselves, because I think it's so easy in our society, right, to become critical of ourselves, because we're taught, like, if you don't have this, then you're not that. If you don't look like this, then you're not worthy, And it's, I think for women, and I feel like we're going to get a little off track, but like, I just feel like for women, especially, like, the marketing has been very fear-based, right? And it gets us away from this place of love.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to just like share this like quick story, but I was doing this deep meditation. As a matter of fact, with my intuitive teacher who I took a class with last summer, we were going through the 7 planes of existence. And when we got to the plane that is basically like your physical 3D reality, the message that came through to me that made me cry was my body being like, I just want you to love me. And it broke me, because we are taught not to love our bodies, right? There's always something wrong. There's always, I want a flatter stomach. I want to be taller. I want to, whatever it is. And it was like, oh my God, like, here I am. I had gone on that physical well-being journey, right? Like, I'm eating super healthy. I'm taking good care of myself. I'm working out. I'm exercising. I do all the things to take care of my physical health. Yet there was a disconnect.
Yeah. And I think that's something that so many people can relate to. And, we can get so image based and focused on image. And nourishment is not just what we eat, it's what we take in visually, auditorily, the energies that we surround ourselves with. And I think early on in my, well-being journey, I recognized that there were certain frequencies that were not good for me. News, I don't really watch the news, because I don't find that it's helpful for me. And it's not this like blinders, things are not happening. It's that is not where my energy needs to go in order to help the positive path of the planet. That's not for me. And like shifting to listening to podcasts, listening to books on tape, meditating, like, what am I feeding myself? How am I nourishing myself, mind, body, soul? And I think what you're talking about is that shift, that beautiful arc that you talked about before, that shift of, it's not just about the physical piece of nourishment, but your body actually saying to you, why can't you just be loving to me? That's super powerful.
Yeah. And, I agree with you in terms of the news and like that soul nourishment, right? That you're talking about, like, absolutely 100%, it makes a difference. And I think when you can integrate all those pieces of yourself, right? That seemed like we were talking about the mind, the body, and the spirit. You can love yourself fully when you're able to integrate all of that together, right? And really understand the connections, because, sometimes it's like our experiences that we've had as children, we kind of disconnect. Like, if you are, and we'll get back like to human design, for example, like if you have a totally open solar plexus, as a child, like, everyone else's emotions around you felt really hard when they were big emotions that we couldn't handle as children. And nobody teaches you how to manage other people's emotions. Sometimes, like, you just disconnect from it because it's too much and it's overwhelming.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that at least was my experience, being very empathic and very tuned into other people's emotions. I was just born that way. And it created a lot of anxiety, you know. But not to like fast forward to the end game, but what I kind of recognized in the past couple of years is that doesn't have to be the story, that, you know, feeling sorry for myself that I was a child with high anxiety. The empathy and the skills that I gained from that, you know, like you said, this life experiment, you know, being a human being, having an experience, you know, and coming back now in my 40s to being able to go back in my timeline to times where maybe I had that experience and I didn't feel safe, or I felt scared or anxious, and to, you know, what I was thinking when you were saying your body was like, why can't you just love me? Like, where in your timeline is that coming from? Is it 7-year-old you? Is it 10? Is it 13? Is it 18? And taking that process of going back through my timeline and loving on my child. Because, you know, and again, we're sort of getting a little like big and heady for people, but like there is no specific timeline. We're here, there, and everywhere all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, for sure. And, you know, I think like going and doing that healing work, right? Of going back and healing those stories and reframing them, and, you know, not to get into like neural plasticity and all that kind of stuff of like,
let's go. You know, I'm willing to go there.
Well, so like, you know, like you talked about the gratitude practice, being able to do that. But, you know, with my clients, aside from doing like gratitude and everything, I feel like you have to use a lot of different tools, really, you know, really to kind of get to everything, because there are so many different modalities and you'll find what works for you. But for me, like I also use EFT, which is tapping, right? I'm an EFT practitioner. And for me, like I have experienced personally, and I've seen people experience personally, these deep healing shifts of recognizing where these limiting beliefs come from and healing these like micro traumas, right? Because like we talk about trauma and we often think it's like a big thing. We talk about it like, oh, it's like a sexual assault, or it could be domestic abuse, whatever it is. But there's micro traumas that happen to us throughout our lives that create the narrative that we tell ourselves, like that you said, like those tapes that kind of play in the back of our minds. Mm-hmm. And how do we go back and rewrite all of that to be able to become the full expression of who we are, right? And to really change the trajectory of the path that we're on, and to reconnect back to that joy, you have to kind of go back and heal those wounds, right? Those scars that maybe are still there, but are causing you to trigger in a certain way, to respond in a certain way, to think a certain way, and get caught in that loop, that loop that you're telling yourself, like, I'm not good enough, right? And this is why I'm talking about like self-worth, like knowing that you're good enough. Mm-hmm. Knowing that who you are is more than enough. Knowing even that your purpose is just being who you are, and aligning to that, and standing strongly in that. Your whole purpose is to be who you are. But who are you?
Right.
And do you love yourself enough to be that in every situation and come from a heart-based place and not from fear?
Oh my God. I mean, that, like, we could just wrap that up in a bow and give that to everybody. I think that's so huge, that like who you are. And I think where I got stuck was, how do I know who I am versus the conditioning that I've been taking in since day one. So I think that like that can anchor us a little bit in intuition, maybe. Yeah.
Well, and just human design. I mean, that's like the greatest thing. It literally gives you this permission slip to be who you are, and to really hone in and understand the different elements of the energies that make up who you are. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to, we can start talking about, you know, where your intuitive gifts sort of lie in the chart. Listen, at the end of the day, like I said, we all have all of the chart. We are all intuitive. We all have the ability to connect spiritually. We all have the ability to talk to our spirit guides, to our angels, to our past loved ones. It's just like any other talent that you have or gift that you have. The more you practice it and the more you hone it, the more reliable it becomes. And there's a big component of self-trust that comes along with that, because knowing that you can trust the inner guidance that you're receiving is huge. And know that you're not like making it up, because I think that a lot of us, when we come into our intuitive gifts and we start realizing that we have these abilities, we start to doubt ourselves, right? We like, wait a second, like I could just be maybe I'm just telling myself the things I want to hear and not what is really being shared with me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just have to jump on that because I feel that was me. Like having those, gut hits and like not listening to them. I mean, even just on when was it? On Sunday, like about a week ago, I got like an intuitive hit. I had a $20 bill in my pocket, and I had a little intuitive hit that was like, you should not keep that in your pocket. And I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. And went on with my day. Guess what? Lost the $20 bill. And I was like, and there were a couple things that happened that day, and I was like, yep, there's my little experiment when I don't listen.
So I would love kind of offering like a little bit like a coaching tool that I would do with my clients to kind of help them build that self-trust.
Yeah.
It's literally writing things like that down. So you have the evidence in writing. Again, going back to that, like how powerful writing can be. And then being able to go back and read it and be like, okay, like the last time I got this little quiet little knowing that just kind of appeared and showed up and I didn't listen, look what happened. So next time I know I can trust it.
Yeah.
It's building that trust. It's building the evidence to prove to your mind, because that's the biggest thing, right? Like we, from a very young age, are taught the power of our minds, right? And our minds are powerful, but they sometimes get in our way. The doubt that comes with it gets in our way. The fear that our minds create sometimes that's not real holds us back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, if we want to talk about like intuition, we can talk about like first, like the different types of intuition, right? So like, how do we experience intuition? We experience it through maybe clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. Sometimes it's just vivid dreams. Sometimes it's like you can see mental images in your mind. It might be through seeing chakras or auras. People have that ability. And we have clairaudience, right? So we might hear voices in our head, and no, you're not crazy. We might hear actual external noises. I don't know, Kelly, if you've ever been in a situation where you've been doing something and you feel like someone called your name and you turned around and you're like, who just called me? And it was nobody. But something was trying to get your attention in that direction.
That's one of my clairs.
Is it?
I definitely have chatter in my head. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And, and of course people always laugh and they're like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay. But it's different than, like, I find when it's an intuition, it's very quiet. Mm-hmm. It's very unemotional. Mm-hmm. And it's quick and gone. And if I'm not real tuned in, I can miss it. Or it's like I don't recognize it until like 10 minutes later that it happened.
And maybe we could talk about, what's the difference between getting that intuitive hit and it being something that's fear or that looks like anxiety, right? So if you have a little voice that's telling you like, be careful, like someone's going to get hurt. I mean, like maybe there's like some element of that, but like if it's coming very emotionally, it's your head. Like it's your head. It's not coming from your actual intuition. And so I think that people need to be mindful of that. Like if it's coming and it sounds like fear, it's not your intuition. There is instinct, right? There's a difference between instinct and intuition. So you get goosebumps, you get in your car, you're driving, you're on the highway, you're about to change lanes and you get goosebumps. Or you get like a tap, you feel like a hand on your shoulder or something like draws your attention. And you're just about to change lanes and a car comes speeding by, like, okay, good. If you have a little voice in your head who's maybe like alerting you even, right? Like you're like, ooh, be careful. And they're calm. Okay, like that's your intuition. But if you're driving and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get into a car accident, blah, 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 like your head's just like going nuts. Like your brain's going nuts. It's all in your head. And you don't need to like, you can kind of dismiss it, right? Like you can feel the fear and do it anyway. Like just keep moving on. So that brings me to another one, clairsentience, right? That feeling, that tingling that you might get. It might be the goosebumps. It could be some sort of sensation. I know that when I'm connecting with people's loved ones who have passed, one of the identifying pieces of information I always ask for is how somebody passed. And I will get the sensation of what they experienced before they passed. So it might be like, I felt like a choking feeling. You know, I've gotten like a pain in my chest. I've gotten like, you know, feeling really nauseous, like knowing me like there was like some sort of like stomach cancer or like digestive issues. And so it's very different. It's really interesting. Like whenever I do readings for people for past loved ones, because like to actually feel something that someone else felt is it's wild. There's clear empathy, right? We basically touched on this before. It's like feeling other people's emotions. So something that maybe like, but like something sometimes that we think is a curse, right? Like you had this anxiety because you felt everyone's emotions and you feel like, oh, why do I have to feel everyone's emotions? Like it makes me feel really heavy. And it's actually your greatest superpower, right? It's actually,
And I became an occupational therapist and my specialty is sensory integration. And, you know, it took me a long time to realize that I was using my gifts in my therapy with my kids. Like I'm able to read where they are and I'm not going to offer them something that's going to set them off, and I can help them sort of soothe. But also very helpful, like working in schools, going into a teacher's classroom, I can read the energy of the classroom, the energy of the teacher, like know very fast what they're able to do. And I always thought it was my visual observation, but I think it was also energetics. I can read the energetics and the emotions and like have that intuitive hit that like, okay, this is not the teacher, this is not the day. Like to push for something, like I can feel that there's something that's going to overwhelm them. And for kids, you know, knowing what they need. And, you know, I work with kids who are nonverbal and I don't need to hear from them their words to know what they're feeling and what they might need. I have a very strong intuitive connection to them.
It's so amazing. It's beautiful.
I mean, and you know, like you said, like you might have something that feels right now that is a curse because it can be overwhelming, especially if you don't have the tools to either be boundaried or not take on so much. Yeah.
Definitely. The next one is claircognizance, right? That clear knowing, you know, just knowing, but not knowing how you know. You know, you can usually, like for me, like I can tell sometimes when someone's pregnant and like they won't tell me. I may not even see them. I might just hear their voice. Like this happened with my kid's teacher during the pandemic. They were on a Zoom and she was just talking and I was like, she's pregnant. And
you just knew.
I just knew. And like we found out like a month later, like, oh yeah, she's pregnant. And I didn't see her. I didn't see her on the Zoom. Like, you know, she's sitting at a desk. You could see from here up. Like you can't tell anything. But it's like that clear knowing. There's clear olfactants, like that clear smelling. I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but it's like you can smell a past loved one, or you can smell like a rat. You can sniff out a lie. Like you can just tell, like when someone's telling you something, you can like pick up right away that like, no, this isn't the truth. They're not in integrity with themselves. And then, you know, where is this all in the chart? where is this in human design? I wanted to like lay out what the clairs were so we understood what we were looking at. But, you know, your instinct is really comes from your spleen. So if your listeners have, you know, their human design chart, you can pull it out and we can kind of walk through it. But having, you know, your spleen is your center for instinct. And actually each of the gates on the spleen points to a different intuitive gift as well. So, you know, it's that in the moment intuitive hit, like you mentioned, that small, quiet thing. It's also where fear lives. So every gate is also associated with a fear. The gates, for example, if you want to go through the spleen gates, like if you want to look at your chart, Kelly, like gate 48.
I'm looking.
Gate 48 is the gate of clairvoyance. It's having vivid dreams. It's having those future visions. It's kind of knowing without knowing how you kind of know in a way. Gate 57. This is the most intuitive gate in the chart. It's called the psychic ear. It's where clairaudience lives. Now, clairaudience lives in, and all of these live in multiple places within the chart, but we're just kind of highlighting quickly. So it's really like, you know, that clairaudience comes definitely from that 57. It's very strong. Gate 44 is clairolfactance, right? And which makes sense because it's part of the channel of integrity, right? So you can tell when someone's out of integrity. You can sniff out that lie. You can smell that something's off.
Yep. It's just interesting to me because, I have 48 connected to 16, and I have the channel from 44 to 26. Mm-hmm. So people cannot lie to me. I might not tell you that I know you're lying because I think sometimes people are untruthful for so many different reasons. So I'm not one to be like, nope. But like if somebody tells you they're fine and they're not fine, I know you're not fine. Like you don't have to say a word and I know you're not. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's also that clear empathy, right? So it's like the combination, right? All these things kind of play together. So it's like you have all these different data points as you're talking to somebody that kind of help you clue you into that intuitive information.
Yeah.
Gate 50 is clairsentience. So this actually is like really intuitively feeling what other people need. It's a tribal energy. So it's like knowing what your people need to bring them back into alignment. Gate 32 is clairvoyance. So awareness of what needs to be done to make a dream a reality, right? That gate 32 is also about enduring and preparing for the next thing. So that totally makes sense. The gate 28 is clairaudience and also claircognizance. So it's part of the knowing circuit. The gate 28 is also associated with the gate of struggle, right? So it's like being wise about what's worth struggling for and, what's meant to come from that. What lessons you're here to learn. You can even recognize the patterns in other people too. Gate 18 is clairsentience. So, that might even feel like, what's coming next, like a future sense of like what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think it's just so cool that you talked about the spleen, and that for me is a defined center. And has a couple motor connections in my chart. But I think I got myself into a lot of trouble when I was younger, not knowing that I had a lot of intuition. It's sort of like having more information about things than people knew I had because I just had it, I just knew. And already being mad at somebody for something that they didn't know I knew they did because I didn't have like factual, like concrete knowledge. But that just hit me. I'm like, that's probably gotten me into trouble a couple times.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I feel like even people who have that like clear sight, like those clear visions, like where they can see people who have passed, oftentimes like when we're born, like we are born with our intuitive gifts like fully turned on. And it's not until the age of 7 where things kind of start to shift a little bit. And if as children we had like imaginary friends or we saw loved ones who passed and we shared that with an adult, if we didn't feel accepted for that ability, right? Or we were like kind of like, oh, like, okay, whatever, I'm sure you saw grandpa, like I'm really sure, and you got turned off by that, or you felt scared because you were able to, and you didn't understand why no one else could see this person that you were seeing. We turn it off. And so I think that happens. Like if you have experiences where, you have this information or something and you have something that conditions you to like, maybe I don't really know. You start questioning yourself or you're like, this isn't safe to know, or this isn't safe to feel or safe to see. We turn it off and we can totally reactivate that. And that's the beauty of intuition because we all have it. And it's just a matter of cultivating it and learning how to access it in a safe way where we feel safe. Because when we feel safe, it opens us up to receive more.
Yeah, completely relate to that. Yeah, feeling safe. And I think it has made me so much happier, so much like lighter and the capacity for healing has been so huge because of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the trusting piece that comes along with it, right? Trusting to know that you will be guided if you just listen. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to figure out everything. And I think even like when you lose, like I know like you just lost your mom, like knowing that you still have a connection because that love doesn't die, right? It's energy. That's what this is all about. It's all about energy, right? Like Love is the highest frequency of energy.
Yes. Yeah.
And being as empathic as you are, you can feel that. I'm sure you can feel your mother's love around you, right?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have such a clear, like, when she was alive, I felt her energy with her. And now I feel her energy everywhere. It's like a warm blanket.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful experience. We obviously would love to keep them all here, but we all know, like, we're still connected. We're all connected all the time.
Yeah. I feel grateful that I had so many tools at my disposal for how to process. And, I think a lot of times we become fearful of experiencing our feelings. Like, we think our feelings, we don't feel our feelings. We talk them, we don't feel them. And I've been so much more conscious of, like, allowing the feeling of feelings and not feeling like I need to, like, prevent myself from feeling feelings. Yeah, and I think that's such a subtle thing, but it's a big thing. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to that control thing. We tend to not want to feel those emotions because they're uncomfortable. So we try to control them and stuff them down or distract ourselves away from them or numb ourselves from feeling them. But we need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't done the numbing. I think, like, and that's the thing, like, I think a lot of us, that's like our quick, like, have a glass of wine, like, disconnect. I've really deepened connection, like, and it's a subtle change, but it's really, really powerful. And, I don't think if I hadn't had all these experiences that I had, I don't think my experience of loss would be the way that it is.
Yeah.
And it's much more therapeutic than painful.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And that, I love what you said, though, about how there wasn't fear, right? Because fear keeps us stuck, too. And when we're stuck in the grieving process, it's really painful.
Yeah.
It's so painful. And the grieving process doesn't end, right? Like, we have our moments, of course. And we're always going to miss them. Like, you miss being able to pick up the phone and to have that human interaction. But if you know that you can connect with her still and still receive her guidance and her love, that's powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And I think it for me has allowed me to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about, to still be available for experiencing joy.
Yes. Yes.
And that is the overall experience, that life can continue to be joy-filled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we're connected to love.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge piece of this piece of being really connected to your intuition, at least for me, has been, life is a lot easier, more in flow. It's not fast paced. That I have always felt that pressure. Like, they talk about the manifesting generator, like, I've got the open head and ajna and the open root, which means, like, it's a pressure cooker. So always feeling this pressure. So I feel the pressure, but I don't indulge the pressure. So, like, that's been one of the things that I've learned through my intuition, that, like, I can feel those triggers, but I don't have to indulge those triggers. And even though, you do kind of, when you indulge them, you get into, like, that complaining, or, like, it gives you an excuse to do something, like, you get that kind of, like, little hit of, I don't know if it's dopamine or serotonin or something, like, that kind of gives you that quick fix, that you have that feeling like everything is okay. It's like choosing to do the deeper work and it's a little bit harder and it's not as quick a response, but the overall arc is better, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it comes down to like almost like divine timing in some way, right? Like we feel like it's not controlling the timing because we're not in control of the timing, and releasing into just allowing things to unfold, because likely they're going to unfold better than what you even were pushing for. So it's stopping from just pushing with willpower all the time. And sometimes it's willpower we don't even have, right? We're borrowing it from somebody else.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that leads us into frustrating situations, right? Because I'm a generator. So like similar emotional theme, right? Of like pushes you, like that frustration. You're just like, oh my God, how did I get here? How do I get out? Which can be hard.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. I have a very strong will. I have access to will. So like I have to remind myself that not everybody has that. So like when I dive into will, it's usually not my own energy to do it. I just kind of have it. But I think that's such a really good point, you know, kind of going back to how we treat ourselves, and that can be really hard on your body, even though it's positive and even though it's good. Like if you're pushing yourself past what your human suit can do.
Yeah, well, then we risk burnout. So, which a lot of us have experienced over the last couple of years, I think, you know, with the pandemic and everything like that. It's, you know, if you keep pushing and pushing with energy reserves you don't have, or dipping into what you have and not doing it from the overflow like you talked about earlier, we really put ourselves at risk for burning out. And then you're not connected to joy, right? It's harder to get back to that place of joy.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier about like being yourself, I think is so important. You know, we were talking about before we came on, like talking about social media and how, you know, you can feel this like desire to keep up with the Joneses, like do what everybody else is doing. And that if you're not, you're doing something wrong. And I'm not talking like just everybody. I'm talking even like in the niche of the things that you do. It's so easy to get pulled into that.
Yeah. And then you're not using your energy correctly because it's not aligned with who you are. So it does go back to that. You know, you have to put yourself out there in a way that feels correct for you, and make sure like your human design, actually, like that's one of the things that I just love about it. It's simplest form of understanding your type, your strategy, and your authority. It's like, how are you meant to interact with people energetically, right? How are you meant to give your energy and receive your energy? How are you meant to respond, like not respond, but like make decisions, so that when you see other people doing things and you're being told this is how you have to do it to have success, you can listen to that inner authority that's like, oh, that doesn't feel right in some way. Right?
Yeah.
You can listen to that and not burn out, because you're not going to be using your energy in a way that is not correct for you.
Right. Yeah. And that was a harder and more recent in the past couple years lesson for me. Like, I think I prioritized authoritative people, like people in authority, over my own inner authority, and made choices, and then got to burnout, not physical burnout, but functional burnout. Like, and I hit October last year and I was like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to take a break. And like, it wasn't like I didn't feel sick. I didn't feel like completely run down. I wasn't lying on the couch. Like, I was still functioning. But like, in terms of, you know, pursuing things for myself, I was like, I needed to like clear the slate, clean off the whiteboard, leave it blank, and just give myself time and space to be on my own before I was ready in November to come back. And I came back, and my guides tapped me on the shoulder and they were like, time for the podcast. And I was like, really? And they were like, go. I was like, dude, what should it just start? Just go. So I appreciate that like experience of like, you know, sometimes things are very subtle and sometimes it's literally a tap on the shoulder and like pointing you right where to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can completely relate to your functional burnout. I think I experienced it around the same time that you did. And it was like, as soon as like I started experiencing a lot more brain fog and like just started losing motivation for things that normally I was very driven by, I was like, hold on, something's off. I need to tune in. I need to go inward. I need to focus on me. Like there's something up here. I'm burnt out. Like you said, like I still had energy to like do what I needed to do, but they're just that that drive, like that passion just wasn't there.
Yeah. And it's a strange feeling. It's like this emptiness. And now I look at it, I can kind of, it's always better to look at things in hindsight because I feel like you could just kind of dissect it a little bit better. In hindsight, I think I was operating in so many different directions that I was heading towards being burnt out and feeling dissatisfied, not because the things I was doing weren't lighting me up, because many of them were. They were enjoyable and I was good at doing them, but it was so diverse that I didn't feel like I had the capacity to put more into it and go bigger. And it's super interesting to me because you're not the first person to say. Almost every single person I've talked to on this podcast has said something to the effect of being who you are, you know, being unique, being authentic, having integrity, like sticking to what it is that you do, what you have to offer, and being that individual and like taking it to the nth degree, because that's what we're really here to do. We're not here to assimilate and, you know, follow conditioning and be similar to one another. We're here to be completely diverse and offering each of our unique colors to the planet. And if I try to be more like you, it's inauthentic. It's not going to feel good. You know, not everybody is going to be able to come on a podcast and say, I'm going to talk about mystical things and we're going to nerd out. That's not for everyone, and it doesn't have to be. But, you know, I keep getting that as the message, as what I'm supposed to be talking about. And everybody that's coming on is sharing something very similar. So it's interesting to me that you also had kind of that functional burnout around the same time. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the flow of the pandemic, especially if you're a working parent, school going back in September, and just the exhaustion of everything. Yeah.
I mean, we're definitely under, you know, the same collective energy. And so it's interesting how like sometimes our paths, we're kind of experiencing the similar things and themes, and it just maybe gets expressed differently through the lens and filter of who you are, like you said. So like for me, like what I experienced during that functional burnout was like I started tuning more in and realized that there were certain things I still needed to heal and work on, even though I thought I had been through them, right? Because I think that like personal healing journey is very personal, right? You think you've healed something, and then all of a sudden it shows up in another way. And it's almost like that was just the tip of the iceberg. Oh, no. There is way more underneath all this that needs to get cleared.
Yeah. Oh my God. So true. I think about like, I use the Akashic records a lot. I have a friend, Laura Mazzata, who, you know, teaches, if you've never done accessing your Akashic records, she teaches people a beautiful way to get in there. And so I started just doing that more frequently. I learned how to do it in the summer, and I started doing it almost daily, and really delved into my inner landscape and my higher self. And I realized, like, one of the things about the Akashic records and your guides is they're never going to give you more than you can handle in the moment. So you can ask them questions, and there might be a bigger answer that you're not aligned with right now. So it's like what you were aligned for healing at one moment is going to look vastly different the next time you get it on another level. Yeah.
So true. It's so true. And I even can take that connection back to even when I'm connecting with people's loved ones who have passed. If someone has passed within, you know, a 1 to 2 year span and we're connecting with them, they're only going to share as much as that person's able to handle in that moment, because they're still going through that healing and grieving process. So it's fascinating because like what you're saying ties back in a lot of different ways. Like we're only given as much as we're able to handle. And I think that like that's always been like a motto of mine, is like, God's not going to give me anything I can't handle.
It's true.
And again, like it might show up again and I might have to do the work again, but it's from a different perspective. There's a different, it's almost like you're zooming out a little bit further each time, like to see like a little bit more than you saw before. Or maybe you're zooming in, right? You're getting a little more granular, a little more detailed. Depends on how you want to look at it. But it's just, it's amazing how like we can feel safe when we're going through things because we're not given more than what we're able to kind of process at the moment.
Yeah.
Because we're being protected.
Yeah. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned more than anything in this past year or so, is that you are more protected and surrounded by love than you could even imagine. Our brains don't have a full capacity for that. And recognizing that makes a lot of those moves that you would have second guessed yourself for a lot safer to shift into.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of one of the things I always say, like, how do you move past the fear? It's really the trust, the faith that you're being divinely supported and divinely guided and divinely protected all the time. And that love, when you feel it, is unlike any kind of love I feel like you can experience here on earth, because your human body can't even almost handle it all, because it's so much and it's so powerful and it's so beautiful that it would, like, our human form can't handle it all. We can't.
I have like this vision of us just like, poof.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I love that. So I want to shift into a little more about you and what you're up to. How are you taking all of this, and how can people connect with and work with you?
Sure. So I am an energy healer and a life coach. And so I do work with clients one-on-one. I'm currently working on a bunch of different things. I feel like I'm in this like creative phase right now, where I have like all these great ideas and I'm sort of working on implementing them. But I'm working on like a signature program of how to really reconnect back to your joy, and kind of getting more granular on how to get through like those big foundational things in a deeper level, right? Like how sometimes we just need like a guide or someone to kind of coach us through and give us the tools that we need to get there, because we can talk about it at a very high level, but you really kind of have to roll up your sleeves, be ready to like roll up your sleeves and do the work, and to have someone who can hold a safe space for you to be able to do that in a way that allows for the deep shifts that have to happen, or that need to happen, or that do happen, I think allows it to unfold. So I'm creating a community. I'm looking to create a community online of people that can really we can all help each other and support each other. But then there's going to be some elements of like coaching that's going to kind of come along with that. So doing some free content, and then offering some courses as well that people can kind of do at their own pace, because I realize that we're all super busy, and sometimes meeting at the same time, the same day, every week doesn't always work with our busy schedules. So anyway, you can find me on Instagram, Carissa Step. You can also find me on my website, www.carissastep.com. I'd love to include a link to Genetic Matrix so people can run their human design charts if they would like to. And I'm happy to, talk to anyone if you're interested in a reading and understanding more about who you are. Just as a standalone service, I do that as well. And I'm also an intuitive medium. So I love connecting people with their loved ones who have passed. So.
Yeah, you wear a lot of hats, but you know what? I find I kind of got into this idea of like, people were saying like, you got a niche, like you got to, and the second you say niche to me, I get this like, ooh, like I don't want to be boxed in. I want to be, but I think sometimes that like the arc of different things that sort of fit who you are and what you do, even though it doesn't make sense in a box, like you can't make it very linear, but when you look at it more deeply, it really does all connect so beautifully together, and I love that. I think that's such a beautiful thing. I think it's great to be diverse, because ultimately it sounds like what you're really helping people do is just live a more vibrant and joy-filled life by being more yourself, more connected, and feeling safe to express who you are.
Yes, absolutely. And I think every element of what I do has to do with healing and energy, right? Because I think at the end of the day, like we all just are energetic beings. And so to get you into, energetic alignment, is so important to just living that life of joy. And so, yes, absolutely. Like I do a lot of different things. I have a lot of different modalities and tools in my toolkit, and I use them with clients in one-on-one sessions based on what it is they need. Because I really feel like I'm here to help people. And oftentimes people come to me when they're dealing with some sort of big transition in their lives, like big transformations are kind of coming. They feel this um, overwhelming sense that something needs to change because they're feeling stuck, right? And they need to get out of that place of stuckness. So I'm here to kind of really help them get back to that place of joy away from being stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think so many people after the past couple years are sort of, I don't know many people who aren't looking at, okay, so what is next? Like, how am I taking all of this, everything that's happened and making some sort of meaning out of it and shifting forward? I feel like there's so few people now, at least that's just kind of my sense of it, who are like looking back, like, let's get back there. It's a lot more people who are like, I don't know. I feel like there's something to be loved about what we experienced over the past couple years.
Well, I mean, even just looking at the Great Resignation, right, movement, I mean, that's just a proof that we don't want to go back. We are reprioritizing. We're reprioritizing our joy, hopefully, right? We're making it more important. We want a better work-life balance. We want to do things we love, things that we're passionate about, things that motivate us, that drive us. And it just feels like we're definitely, and a lot of people talk about this, especially in the human design world, like we are on the precipice of really redefining what our world looks like, what well-being looks like, even just the structure of, the energetic exchange of money.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be like a whole other topic for another podcast.
Totally. Oh my gosh, it certainly could be. Yeah. Yeah, I feel that too. I feel that we're kind of at a tipping point. You can feel the energy rising, and you can feel the more people sort of becoming aligned and connected into shifting change. And that is what is exciting to me, like this possibility of, really truly shifting the world, changing things.
We're basically tearing down old structures, right? We're tearing down old foundations that no longer fit the level of consciousness that we're rising to at this time.
And what's crazy is it's such like some people are out there and they're very like obvious about what they're doing, but there's so many more of us who are just very quietly sitting on our meditation mats and doing the work one person at a time and creating change that's lasting. And so I think what's important about that for me, or what's coming through to share that's important about that, is that not to discredit yourself for even the smallest act of love or self-love. So you said this before about, self-love and getting on that meditation mat or doing that exercise routine or saying no to things that don't light you up so that you can have more time for yourself or with your family. Every time you shift and you change that way and you choose love over anything else, you're changing the planet.
Because everything we do impacts everyone around us. There's always a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are all connected. So it starts with us. You're absolutely right. Like it starts with us. It starts with our internal world will impact what we create in our outer world. So if we all do the work on ourselves, we can have a greater impact on how the outside world looks and how it gets recreated. Because I feel like we are definitely in a big period of transition.
Yeah, you can feel it. What is it? It's a 2027 that there's just going to be this. So we're coming up on that. I know a lot of people are going to be like, what's happening in 2027? What do I need to be prepared for? Whole other podcast. Yeah. Well, and what else is coming through for me is that I've been getting this intuitive hit for doing a series on my podcast for children. And talking with people like yourself about how do we build resiliency? How do we help our children learn how to do self-healing techniques? And I know as a mom, like I had to sort of get myself under control before I really felt, not that I wasn't parenting and not that I wasn't being a good mom, but I felt like I needed so much self-work before I was fully available to be a really good mom. And this could be, moms, dads, grandparents, anybody who identifies as a parent or as somebody who cares for children. So I would love to have you come back. We can think about what we'd want to talk about, but like maybe even just how do we infuse joy and intuition in kids and using human design with our own children and guiding them, and helping them to feel more aligned from an early age.
Absolutely, 100%. And, just to kind of go back to what you were saying, it's almost like when you're on the airplane, right? The oxygen masks drop down. We have to put one on ourselves first before we can help the others around us. And it's so important. Definitely, like as a parent, if you want to become a better parent, the first thing you need to do is work on yourself, heal your own inner child. And when you do that work, honestly, like even when because I've done this, like, and I've noticed it in my children, like as I've done the work on myself, I've noticed big changes in them because it impacts them. And understanding your child's human design and talking to them about who they are helps them stay true to that, right? Like it's so powerful in that sense that you can understand another human being on a different level. And it gives them permission to be who they are. And it's okay that they're different from us, because I think when we were children, oftentimes, my mother-in-law does this all the time. Like she'll be like, "Oh, he reminds me of, Joe, like because he used to do that." And I'm like, "But he's his own person, like he's doing it because yes, like they definitely get conditioned by us and everything. But our designs actually don't come from our parents; they come from our grandparents. So it's very interesting how that all works out too."
Yeah, and I think it's really about sovereignty. That's my word this year. That's the word I was given, and so I've been, doing all that sovereign work in myself, but trying to really think about my relationships with other people, my relationship with my husband, my son, my family. Like, how am I supporting people to be more sovereign and respecting them as an individual? And it's like I've released so much control, and it's like, okay, now you're going to take it to another level. Here's releasing control in like those subtle ways. Like you said, like those little comments that you make and, letting kids explore who they are and what they like, and they don't have to be like you. They don't have to do things the same way.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And even how they're meant to make decisions and how you can more effectively communicate with them too, right? Like, which is huge. I mean, the energy dynamics between you as the parent and your child, like what connections do you make energetically that come into play in your relationship that if you're aware of it, it might change the way in which you approach certain things with them or in the way in which you communicate with them. Which is also, I think huge. It's like, being strong in who you are, but also understanding how your energy impacts someone else and how their energy impacts you. It's just like another little it's just more data points. It's just more information that we have. Because every day what we're doing is we're exchanging energy back and forth with the world around us, with the people around us. So having your energy feel clear, doing the work that you need to do, allows you to come through authentically as who you are, so that you can draw other people into integrity with who they are. Because that's pretty much what happens. It's like, if you're living out who you are, you're encouraging then other people to be who they are because they see you doing it. Yeah. Right. And again, it's like a subtle thing. It happens on an energetic level. It's not even conscious.
Yeah. And don't be afraid when you trigger people. Because I'm noticing a lot of that too. That, when you're doing this work and, like you said, it's on an energetic level. So people feel that on an they feel that energy before they hear the words that you say or what you do. And so sometimes their inner resistance is showing up because they're not ready for that. Yeah.
They're not ready, or depending on like the configurations in the chart, it could even feel like competition to them. Mm-hmm. You might be inspiring competition in them and they're like, hold on, like she's up here and I'm like kind of down here. Like, this isn't fair. How do I get there?
Yeah.
Or try to bring you back down. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just kind of, I think I'm more tuned into that than I used to be. So, yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to look forward to another conversation. Definitely having you back to talk about, using that intuition in human design with your children. I'm so appreciative of your time and your energy. It's amazing. We could probably go on a lot longer because this topic is just such a great one. But I really encourage people to connect with Carissa, find her on Instagram. And I'm excited to see what you're up to. And I'd love for you to come back anytime.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate it. This was great. I love talking with you as always. So thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everyone, and have a good one.